Talk to me about the Olivia tour. How did that go?
Great. I was the lead clinician on it. We did more sessions on that tour than we've done in any other tour. We supported them for the 8 months of that run.
For people who've been in this industry a long time, they know who the artists are who are going to buy into something like this. And so for Olivia, the whole thing was planned. I remember you went to Palm Springs for rehearsals. We were there during pre-production and all the way through, all over the world, and did hundreds and hundreds of clinical hours. I think a lot of even just us sitting here came about because someone on that tour decided to speak publicly about what we had done. We had never spoken publicly about that. And what happened was she started talking about it, and then the press started picking up on it. And so even in the last 3 weeks, we had more eyes on what we're doing because more of our artists are coming out and saying, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. That's the best feedback that we could ever get, is sort of unsolicited people from the tour who say, this was the greatest thing I've ever had on a tour. I commend Olivia and tour leadership for being able to do this.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. Third edition is out now everywhere. All formats, hardcover, ebook, audiobook, however you like books, you can find the book. Today, my guests are Zach Bohr and Chayim Newman of Amber Health. Amber Health is an organization that supports mental health in the music industry. This is one of the most important aspects that does not get discussed enough in the music industry. And so I was very happy to welcome Zach and Chayim on to talk about what they're doing. Now, Amber Health is the organization that has powered mental health support for tours of artists like Billie Eilish and Beyonce, Olivia Rodrigo, Green Day, Ed Sheeran, just to name a few. This is something that a lot of artists at all levels are starting to prioritize, rightfully so, in supporting their crew and their staff and their musicians, performers, everybody that's part of their operation with mental health services. So Amber Health has created the infrastructure for tours to be able to do this. And managers, production managers, tour managers, people that are in charge of running tours, but really the artists at the end of the day are there in charge of it. They're the ones that are kind of bringing in Amber Health to support the tours, but also at a more corporate level, record labels are starting to look into services to support their employees with mental health services, management companies, all of that. So if you want to learn more about Amber Health, you should visit their website. It's just amber.health, AMBER.health. Check them out. You can find them also on the socials at Amber Health. Find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take. You can find me on Instagram at Ari Herstand. But most importantly, if you could pause this right now and leave us a 5-star review on Spotify podcasts or Apple podcasts, and give us a thumbs up on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, however you're listening to this. Give us a follow, give us a subscribe, but most importantly, visit aristake.com and get on the email list. That is the best way to stay in touch with us. aristake.com, sign up for our email list. We'll ping you on new episodes and all the most important stuff about the new music business. All right, let's kick into the show. Zach Bohr, Chayim Newman, welcome to the show.
Hello.
What's up, guys?
Nice to be here. Hello.
Welcome. So today's topic is something that historically has really not been touched on in the music industry very often, and that is mental health. And fortunately, over the last few years, I feel like it is, especially with Chappell Roan's Grammy acceptance speech, it is put more in the forefront of everyone in the industry's mindset. And I think there's just been more of an acceptance around an understanding that mental health needs to be taken seriously. I mean, there, of course, the music industry historically and unfortunately, there's just far too many cases where mental health had not been taken seriously, and there was, horrible outcomes. And we've lost so many artists too young. And because I think in part it just has not been taken seriously. So as the backdrop of, Amber Health, and I'm curious kind of how you guys got this started, why you got it started, and, a little of your backgrounds and everything to bring us up to present day of where we are with Amber Health.
Yeah.
Go for it, Chaim. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sure. So a little bit on my background, so in some ways, like all good stories, they kind of start at the beginning. It's like the origin story of me was my dad was a concert producer and my mom was a therapist. And so I grew up both around the world of backstages and sound checks and green rooms for these charity shows that my dad used to produce. And I think sort of fell in love with the live music environment very early. And then at the same time was also around healing and mental health and support for people. And also was fascinated by that. And, so those two things sort of like lurked in the background as I was growing up, started working in the music industry around 16, promoting small local shows in Toronto, and then eventually sort of fell in love with the festival world and started working in artist relations and hospitality and then credentialing at a bunch of festivals, helped run a major music festival in Iceland for a bunch of years prior to the pandemic. And as I was going sort of through that journey, being in the industry, and building relationships with really, really wonderful people at all sort of like levels and roles of the industry, I think I also saw how hard it was for people and how much people that I came to really care about suffered and struggled being in this industry, for all the reasons that we'll talk about sort of, I'm sure as we go on here. At the same time as doing that, began to pursue a career in mental health, undergrad, master's, eventually a PhD, eventually hospital residency, kind of seeing the other side and also wanting to do something in my life that I think was meaningful and contributed to the world being healthier and with a little less suffering. Eventually, somewhere along the way in 2013, finished hospital residency, went into private practice, and started getting phone calls from all these people I knew in the music industry who I built relationships with over the previous 20 years, who now knew that I was a psychologist and was like, oh, you like kind of understand our experience because you've lived it. And also you have all this clinical training. Could you treat my artist? Could you see this artist I'm working with who's suffering? It was a lot of managers mostly, and began doing that in private practice. And Zack will tell you his stories of the interesting parallels. But, I think at some point where they intersect is that both of us working in private practice recognized, you could be no matter what, quality of therapist you are, it's like you're pretty much capped at seeing 50 people a year. You can't carry a roster of 1,000 people. And and yet there are 150,000 people in this industry that need care at some level and or deserve if they want care at some level. And so, we began to, Zack and I in 2019, when we were introduced, to think about sort of what that model could look like, of how we could expand from being individual clinicians supporting 50 people a year to creating something that could offer support to tens of thousands eventually. And, and that was sort of what eventually became Amber Health.
Right on. Yeah, Zack. Yeah, tell me about this parallel journey.
Well, the parallel journey is, it is interesting as I think about it. We were sort of like living parallel lives unbeknownst to one another, and then they sort of intersected, and here we find ourselves. But I come at this from the artist perspective. So I, post my undergraduate degree in business, I always thought I was going to be a lawyer, but I got the music.
I didn't know that until this moment. We've done dozens of interviews together.
Yeah, I thought I'd sort of be on the business end of the industry, either as a manager or a lawyer, but I was always playing music from a very young age, and decided with a bunch of guys that I had graduated college with to move to New York to start a band. And so 21-year-old Zack moved to New York, started a band, and started bartending at night and playing the New York Lower East Side circuit. And somehow it lasted 10 years, and different iterations of bands, solo projects, recording projects, getting in my car and regional touring and going to a college campus in the Northeast and driving down to Virginia and driving over to Chicago by myself, it sort of started to take a toll on me. And I realized that it was starting to take a toll on me, and all of my insecurities were more pronounced being in the music industry. I found myself more anxious than I had ever been. What I now understand are subclinical levels of depression. So really didn't meet like a diagnosis of depression, but was sort of walking around in a funk and a haze a lot of the time. And woke up and realized that this was not the pursuit that was making me happy. And as I looked around me, I saw all of my artist friends and communities suffering from the same things. Out late at night, till 4 a.m, a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, just this immense anxiety and insecurity, regardless of the level that we found ourselves at. Whether we were at the bottom, in the middle, or really at the top. And so I had to do a lot of soul searching on what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. And through my own career coaching and therapy that I got myself into, decided that becoming a therapist would actually be quite a meaningful path for me, for a lot of reasons. And went back to school, got my master's degree in marriage and family therapy at 32 or 33, and graduated, got in my car, drove out to LA, laser focused on wanting to help the music community, and started a private practice there, and sort of slowly started building a clientele, much like Chayim was, in seeing the system of the music industry, not just the artists, but the managers, the agents, the roadies, et cetera, and understanding that, wow, these mental health issues and challenges are quite pervasive in the entire industry. And, fast forward a bunch of years, Chayim and I were connected through a couple music industry people, and we shared a common goal in providing scalable services to the music industry. And brick by brick, sort of knocking on each door one by one, we managed to create Amber Health and create some programming for the industry, and are now in a sort of scale growth mode where we're able to provide these services at a much, much greater scale than we ever have been before.
Yeah. So tell me about for people that aren't familiar, what is Amber Health?
Yeah. I mean, essentially we're a wraparound service in the way of, we start at the beginning, which is research, understanding from a clinical and an empirical lens what is going on in the mental health of the music industry. We then take that research and use that to develop programming, clinical approaches, ways of delivering clinical services individually to groups, to teams, to companies, right? It's sort of, at all levels of this industry. And then when we develop that programming, we then have clinical teams that go out and implement that programming. And so it's to be able to not just build it, but to then build it and deploy it to be able to support people actively. And, we're sort of the firefighters on the ground. We get a lot of first responder kind of calls in the industry, including as recently as today, when there are crises, deaths, emergencies, injuries, mental health situations, tragic losses. We tend to be the first phone call nowadays for a lot of places in this industry.
So tell me how that works in practice. Like your first responders, you get these phone calls. Give me an example of a phone call that you've received and what it means to be a first responder, and what actually a clinic, when you say you disperse, you send out these clinical teams, how do you do that? Who are these people? Where are you going? What is the programming you're providing? Like break it down. Give me an example.
Well, what we pride ourselves on at Amber Health is that everybody who we work with is in our family of clinicians. So we are not a company or a resource that outsources anything to local people or people that are that we don't have within our system, that we haven't trained, that we haven't that we don't know really, really well.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that we do. Everybody is in-house with us, and we have people really all around the world at this point.
Okay.
And so in terms of a crisis situation, depending on who our clients are, and oftentimes they're not our clients are under contract with us for anything, but they know of us, they will, whether it's a bus flipping over on tour and a bus catching on fire on tour and a crew person overdosing on the road or in a shop or in a label. Unfortunately, the, early passing of people in music industry corporations, sudden loss of a human being where it really affects people. We have dealt with active shooters in the aftermath of active shooters. We have dealt with, and I'm forgetting lots, but these are the type of crises that happen at all levels of the industry. And our team, because all of our team understands both the industry side and the clinical side, we can walk into a situation understanding the entire dynamics and landscape of the music part of it and the industry part of it, but with a really focused clinical lens as well on how to triage, how to support, how to get people the resources that they need in those moments to help, mitigate and manage the situations.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, just Ari, lest you think that people are being intentionally vague, right? Like there's this interesting tightrope of, trying to protect the clinical confidentiality of some of the people we support, especially in some of these delicate situations. And it's when we do get calls, like Zach said, for just talk more a little bit to the clinical side, when we do get calls for, say, a tragic passing of someone, at an industry company or, on a festival team or on a touring team, when we deploy, we'll often meet with the leadership who tend to be heavily affected by these things, can feel responsible for it. We'll work with them also to implement the best plan to be able to support their people, given that this might be occurring in middle of a tour, in middle of a festival, right? And we know the ethos of, that this industry lives by, of the show must go on. And so often we're working in the spaces in between, in the moments of a show day or a festival day or a work day at a record label, whatever it might be. And then we'll, depending on who's affected, we'll meet with individuals, we'll run group therapeutic groups, that sort of thing, to help people manage it in the acute moment, both the individuals that are most affected and also perhaps like the team as a whole. And then usually we'll provide some sort of ongoing structure to be able to care for these people, because as we know, crises, the traumatic impact of crises often doesn't hit on the day of the crisis, right? We're on adrenaline, we're numb, we're in shock. And it might be a week or 2 weeks or a month later when the emotional weight of that really comes, when the wave hits finally. And so we'll often try to put in place a structure for those teams or whoever it is that we're supporting to make sure that when the time comes that it hits, we're there and our clinical team is there to be able to support people.
And I think in a perfect world, we would love to be proactive in every single situation that we have. We would love to be able to front load it with workshops and mental health trainings and sort of understanding, helping people understand their experiences to help minimize the crises. And the crises are common, not only in our lives and unexpected in our lives, but in the music industry, they are more common than other areas of, other working demographics. And part of that is based, we know that the mental health struggles within the music industry are far greater than that of the general population. Chayim can speak more to the research that the team did, but the numbers of mental health challenges within the industry are exponentially higher than the general population, which leads to more crises. It leads to more negative outcomes, Ari, like you were talking about at the top.
Yeah. So, yeah, why is that? Why is the music industry, why do we have higher rates of mental health crises and just mental health issues in our industry, even outside of maybe let's call them the creatives, the artists, the musicians, which, I that makes a lot more sense to me because artists are inherently emotional, sensitive creatures, and they are filtering the world through themselves to create their art, and that is very taxing. And artists feel things a lot deeper than your average Joe. So that makes sense. But all the support people in the music industry, the tens of thousands, 50,000 other people that are not the person on stage, the people on stage, they're not the ones that are, in the studio pouring their heart out, just filtering all this. Why are there higher rates? I believe you, but I'm just curious, have you been able to assess this, or what is it with our industry other than every other industry?
It's a great question. In some ways, it's probably where Zack and I started. We started this conversation in 2019 and then wrote, the white paper, which was the first thing we sort of published, talking about this stuff, which I think was in 2020, early 2021, Zack, that came out. Mm-hmm. And it's like, one of the things which I do, and Ari, this as well as Zack and I, and probably everybody listening to this knows this, which is like, if say like a guitar tech or a sound engineer, it's like, you show me one of them who isn't an artist in their own, in their own mind, right?
That's
it's
a good point.
Every person or has had aspirations or has aspirations or is, producing albums that are amazing on the side that unfortunately don't necessarily get the exposure that some of the more mainstream stuff does. And it's like, this industry is filled with artists at every level. Not all of them are practicing as artists in their day job that pays them, but in some ways, it's replete with creatives who struggle with all of those same things that we know the artists struggle with, right? And they're right brain dominant, and they, and all of those things, and and they need, and they feed off the creativity that comes with an intensity of emotion, right? And so that's true, I think, across all swaths of this industry. So that's sort of like one, piece of it. And then I think beyond that, this industry is consuming. There's no one works a 9 to 5 in this industry. It's not like a thing you do and then you're like, oh, that was my day job, and now I go out and do something else till 11 p.m. It's like, no, this is the thing you do until 11 p.m. You do whatever your official work you're being paid for is until 7 p.m. when you immediately drive to the show, which goes till 11 p.m. when you immediately attend the after party, which goes till 2 a.m. And then when you get home at 2:30, you sleep 5 hours, and then you rinse and repeat the next morning at 8, right? And so this industry, it asks so much of us. It's your weekends, it's your nights, it's defining. We all do it because most of us maybe not all, but certainly most of us in this industry, I feel like, was someone in a support group that we ran during COVID once called the industry the box of misfit toys. It's like so many of us who like didn't really fit in our lives growing up or in high school, and then sort of like found this way to this like accepting, welcoming, non-judgmental circus where you can kind of just like be who you are and do what you want.
Yeah.
But because of that, it's our life. It's not only our job, it's our social world. It's our relational world. It's the thing that gives us a sense of purpose. And that's a lot of pressure to have on any part of our experience, and the more pressure there is, the more stress, and the more we're going to get depressed when things don't go well, and we're going to get anxious about how things are going to play out, and the relationships are going to be heavier and carry more intensity. And I think that's a big piece of this.
Yeah. Who are the people that you said you send out, Zack, to, when there are moments of crises or just you said they're part of your family, they're trained in, they're team members, you don't necessarily outsource this. who are these people?
They are a blend of mental health practitioners and wellness practitioners who all have extensive experience in the industry, that have either gone back to school and become therapists, have become coaches and wellness experts, PhDs, psychiatrists, depending on what people need. So it's interesting. There's just like this movement happening a lot since post-COVID of former music industry professionals getting out of the normalcy of what their lives were. And I think for a lot of, former music industry people, becoming a therapist offers a lot of flexibility. We can work for ourselves. We can make our own hours. We can help people. And what I find is so interesting, because we get submissions and reach outs all the time from clinicians who say, like, I want to be a part of this. People love the music and they love this industry. And for so many, like Chayim was talking about, we don't want to lose the attachment to the music industry. We just know that the grind of the industry is oftentimes unsustainable. And so what is happening, and there are lots of people, whether they are former touring drummers of big bands in the 90s and 2000s, or they are tour photographers or ex-roadies or whatever it might be, they're becoming clinicians now. And we love those people because they understand the world.
Sure.
What makes us unique, and I said this before, is that everybody who walks into an office, a studio, a festival site, on a tour, they understand it all. They don't have to explain to their therapist or their clinician why there's a lack of boundaries, what the manager-artist relationship is, why they're having trouble with their boss, why they're having trouble with the deadline, why they're having trouble with maybe their tour manager or production manager, because everybody on our team inherently understands it and possibly has lived it. And that shared experience is what allows us to connect with people and create results very rapidly.
Yeah, it's almost like we skip that whole initial lengthy rapport building, explain what you do and how you do it and why. And it's like, we're just like, cool, we sit down, we're like, we get it, let's go to work, let's address whatever it is going on in your experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, because you've done this for some years now and you have a lot of experience with various touring operations, with various people at all levels of the industry, I would imagine at this point, all genres, because of course the culture in various genres, I'm assuming, totally dramatically differ. Yeah, totally.
By the way, and even within the same genre, like if you just take two tours or two production companies or two record labels, it's like, that's one of the challenges in working in this industry is like our clinical team, and I think really Zack and I tried to, and continue to try to model this for them, is like, you have to be nimble because it's not uniform, right?
Yeah. Do you find that it's oftentimes they say the culture of the operation, is top down. It comes from the leader. Maybe it's the artist, it's the band. They're essentially the CEO of the operation. They are leading the whole operation. Whether they want to believe that or not, they really are. Essentially the buck stops with them, and they should have the full authority and the power to hire, fire, create the tour however they think is best to be created, or the operation of the company or whatever it is. What are some, for the artists that are listening to this right now, what are some tools or resources or ways that they can improve their operations so they run into fewer crises, and you're not doing triage on this, but it's preemptive. It's something that they want to take mental health seriously. They want to invest in mental health for their operation, for their team, their band, their touring operation at any level, whether it's a 5-piece band that's in a Sprinter touring clubs around the country, or it's Beyonce, Give me, for the artists that do want to be proactive, what do you recommend?
Zach, so could I say one thing first, and which is probably the most controversial thing I've ever said on a podcast ever?
Uh-oh.
I know. Here's your caveat, right? Everybody, feel free to edit this part out, and then Zach, and then please weigh in on this because I think you'll have interesting insight. So here's the thing that I think the first thing that I think artists can do is like, God, this is going to sound so bad. Don't live in an ivory tower disconnected from your crew and your team. And I think what happens is certainly at the bigger scales, right? And it's like, and you watch how it is when you start off on a tour early on in your career, right? You're in a sprinter, there is no crew, and then eventually you're in one bus and there's 2 crew members. And then eventually there's 6, 5 band and 1 tour manager and 6, crew members. And then eventually there's a band bus and a crew bus. And as soon as you get to that level, there starts to be this split where it's like the band stays at a different hotel eventually, or the principal artist stays at a different hotel. And then they're showing up to the venue at different times. And then they're, when you get to the biggest levels, it's like most artists have no clue who's on their crew. Right. And sometimes they'll never even interact with them. And so it makes it hard for them to stay connected to that experience of like, what are these people empathic to that? What are these people going through? And what can we do to support them? Because they're like living such a different life than them. And I think what we found is some of the artists that we've worked for who are the most mental health forward and really lean into taking care of their crews, they're also the ones who are like eating at catering together with them and not like just like disconnected and living. And they're walking and stopping in the halls and like, getting to know the people that they work with, and they're interacting with their tour leadership. And there's not, 7 layers of gatekeepers in between. And I think as an artist, it's really easy in the beginning of your career. And as your career expands, I would encourage artists to maybe not lose a little bit of that ethos of like, stay connected to your people, right? And the greatest CEOs of companies know what's going on with their people, and they stay plugged in, and they're familiar and they relate to them. And I think if our artists could could keep that at the forefront of their mind, they'll be able from the jump to do a better job of caring for them.
Yeah, I love that sentiment. Oh, Zach, sorry, did you want to add on to that?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
I love that sentiment behind it.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good. I'll have plenty of time to talk.
No, but here, so real talk. I love that sentiment, and I agree. We all hear the stories of these disconnected artists that just are almost operating on like a parallel tour because they're really not amongst everyone there, and they just like get like beamed on stage, when it's time to perform, and then beamed off to another universe, and then there's a whole operation that operates alongside of it, and that I can understand. Now, on the other end of the extreme, you see like I watched the Lizzo documentary. And you see that like Lizzo, and full disclosure, I don't know Lizzo. I don't know her touring operation. This is just what I've gleaned from the documentary and the news reports and the articles and on and on and on. And I think she's brilliant. She was in the documentary. She's like embedded, like you say, with the team, with the dancers, with the musicians. She is there. She's amongst everybody. She's offering emotional support. She's one of the team members, one of the crew, and seems like from the doc that she's doing exactly what you're suggesting. And now none of us know what actually went down. We've read the reports of some of the, dancers or some of the, performers or crew members or something like that. And there's conflicting reports and on and on and on. And when you're at that level, I can understand that there's always going to be people that are trying to get a piece, that are trying to rip you down or tear you down. And there's a lot of responsibility as the artist, especially at that level, at a superstar level. there's always people with ulterior motives, and yes, we could say, well, it should come from the hiring standpoint, and maybe the artist should be there hiring, but all that to say, it's a little bit different than like an anonymous CEO leading a company who can be in the trenches or even go on Undercover Boss, and literally the employees don't even know what the CEO looks like. Whereas like you have the superstar. So I empathize with both sides, and also with the artists that are like, okay, well, as protection,
totally,
I can't fraternize with the crew and the performers and everybody.
They're not doing it out of malice. Totally, I agree with you.
But I also support the sentiment, and like, if I'd like to believe that if I was a superstar at that level, I would be with the crew, with the team, checking in with everybody, making sure that everybody is having a good time and feeling good about the operation and prioritizing all of that. But I'm curious if you've actually had these conversations with the superstars, with the CEOs, with those people that are writing you the checks essentially at the end of the day, and maybe how they're approaching it or why it's gotten to that point.
Well, I think let me back up for a second, because I think it's interesting, because what is happening now, and Chayim and I are sort of at the forefront of this, because we're on the ground and we see it in a deep level. Right. We have the corporate conversations. We have the conversations with the people teams at record labels and promoters. And then we have discussions with tour directors and management. And then we get to go in on the bottom level and work with the people. So we see it on every level. Right. Here's what is happening is there is a shift happening. And I think part of what I would say to artists or decision makers who are listening is just be aware that what's happening on your teams and on your crews and in your workforce, people are suffering, right? And so I think just the recognition and the understanding that people are suffering, even if we're not at catering with them or doing it for all the reasons that you said, and really the inability for a CEO to get down in the trenches with all of their employees and all of their workers. I think what we have to understand, and this is what's so interesting about the research that, Chayim and that the research team did, is that we can stand up on a stage in front of 1,000 music industry professionals, and we will say, how many of you have either suffered from a mental health issue, have seen an artist suffer from a mental health issue, and everybody will raise their hand because the experience is pervasive to everybody. But when you put up the data on a screen that says that 26% of people on tour are suffering from active suicidal ideation or have attempted to take their own life in the last year, mouths drop. And it is a stark reality that for all the reasons that we've talked about, these are very complicated industries. And you can have the best touring boss and the best boss in the world. It doesn't eliminate the fact that people are still working 18, 19-hour days. They're on a bus with 12 other people. They're away from their family and friends. They are getting into interpersonal conflicts with their buddies and everybody else because it's a high stress work environment. We're flying speakers that weigh 10,000, 15,000 pounds. There is a dangerous element to it. Yeah. We are taking our work home with us. We are missing funerals. We are missing weddings. We are missing our children's birthdays and the birth of our children and marriages of our family because of what the industry takes from us. Yeah. And we do it voluntarily, and there's a lot of amazing things about this. So I don't want to say it's all bad, right? I think it is an amazing industry and people love working in it. But there has to be a recognition that people are suffering at a higher level than any other working demographic in the world. And so, cool, you can be the best boss in the world and provide extra layers of support to try to get some of these numbers down.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. The last thing I'll say is, being a marriage and family therapist, what we know is that when you put two people in an environment, right, what we call a dyadic relationship, inevitably there's conflict. Always. There is never,
Sure.
give me one amazing relationship that doesn't have some sort of conflict in it. Cool. And then you put 350 people on the road, or you put 5 buddies in a Sprinter van together, right? With fucking Cheetos bags and farts all over the place, right? It's like, there's inevitably going to be conflict. And so we can have the greatest CEOs and the greatest this, and we can understand that there's still going to be conflict. There's still going to be stressors. And I think what we're seeing is leaders, heart-centered leaders, champions of these causes are understanding that and choosing to make investments into the support services.
And it's
so what are the go ahead, Chayim?
No, I was just going to say, I think that's the point I was trying to, it's not necessarily that the artist needs to be like practically in the milieu, but they need to be aware of what's going on in the milieu enough to be willing to like invest in taking care of those people, right?
And if the artist can't, at least management or the buffer or between the artist and everybody else who's in the operation understands it and chooses to say, like, we want to prioritize this.
So tell me about logistically, what does this mean? What does it mean to invest in this, and what does it mean to take care of your crew?
You know, so there's ideal world and real world. I think ideal world is, and this is sort of, I think the recent Billboard article that, sort of talked about some of the work we're doing really like highlighted this is, it's like the notion of having this be a line item in a budget. It's like you provide for transportation, you provide for hotels, you provide for food catering for your team, you provide for mental health support for your team. And that's like at the most basic level. It's so far in the ideal world, it's like in advance, it's already written into the budget in the calculus going like, hey, we're going to take people out, right? And if it's like a large world tour from an arena or stadium level, it's like that tour might go for 2 to 3 years and you're getting people to sign on, to commit. I remember an old buddy of ours who was a stage right guitar tech saying that he got a phone call from an artist who, funny enough, we now work with this particular tour. He's long moved on since, but they called him one year and they were like, what's on your calendar for the next 3 years? And it's like they were releasing an album, they were plotting their next world tour, and they were like, could you just commit now? So as you imagine getting the phone call tomorrow and it's like, like, what are you doing till September 2028? And it's like, so cool. So when you're thinking about that, as you're calculating how many crew members are we going to need and how are we going to pay for, and what are the things we're going to expect of them, then part of it is, let's make sure this is written into the budget that we can support all these people, because what we're asking of them is pretty intense.
And what is that like specifically? So I'm the artist. I want to add a line item to the tour budget for mental health services. What does that mean? How much is it? What am I paying for?
I mean,
go ahead, Zach.
Go ahead. No, it can be a range of services. So we sort of have a suite of services that we can offer.
Okay.
More often than not on a tour is some combination of on-site visits, virtual support, and being able to intervene in crises. That is essentially what it is, without giving away the secret sauce in a sense. But it's everybody on the tour has access to book individual clinical sessions throughout the tour, whether that be in person or virtual, for usually the length of the run. There are some very kind and forward-thinking artists who provide services between tour legs also. But the way that we have built this is it's the most cost-effective way for the touring industry to be able to actively provide meaningful support. We know that you can't carry a therapist on the road. It's for a lot of sort of legal, ethical reasons, it's really hard. There's a lot of conflict of interest. The carrying costs of having somebody on a tour bus and the food is just astronomically expensive. So we have, we've been doing this now for several years. I think we've been out on 22 or 23 tours at this point. We have a really good understanding of how the routing looks or where the routing is, when to pop in, when to pop out, and then also to be able to actively help people on demand as needed.
Gotcha. Now, we all know how expensive it is to tour, and now not at the superstar level. There's not a lot of extra money around, unfortunately. We hear of artists every day canceling tours at the theater level and below. We're not just talking about bands playing to 100 people a night. We're talking that it is astronomically expensive, so much more expensive than it was even 2019 pre-COVID. That it's almost cost prohibitive. So there are going to be the artists and managers and tour managers, everyone listening to this right now, that are touring clubs, theaters, and they're like, where am I going to find that extra money? There is no extra money. Like, if we break even, that is going to be a win, and we probably won't even break even. And so what can you recommend for the smaller artists that are not with multiple tour buses and, massive crews and hundreds of people on this operation, and sure, what's another $100,000 that's a line item at the decimal point, whatever. What do you recommend to them, and how do they take mental health seriously for those types of tours?
Totally. Well, and I think, so first of all, from our side, it's like, this is something we think about a lot, because we don't want this to be sort of like I don't even know what you'd call it, something like for the elites, right? For the people who are touring at an arena and stadium level only. And I think everybody deserves good clinical care at every level of our world, let alone certainly every level of our industry also.
Yes.
I think because of that, part of what we're doing is, we try to create sort of like modular services where we could have services that also, that are way more cost effective, that can match, one bus tours, club tours, theater tours, the kind of the thing you're talking about. The other thing we're doing is we're partnering with organizations, recognizing that this industry, it's like everything else. There's a real lot of money at the top. There's a lot less money, and like at the entry level, and, finding ways for the top to be able to support. And, it's almost like a mentorship care model, to be able for them to like pay in a little bit. And so, and we're partnered with wonderful organizations like Country Music Association, who wrote a grant this year for us to be able to support a bunch of tours for emerging artists and things that are at the club and theater level who can't necessarily afford the care, to be able to receive like the full suite of support services. And some of them are making tons of use of it. And it's had real impact in a positive way on making their tours more sustainable from an emotional level. And, and I hope what'll happen is those wonderful young artists now playing in clubs and theaters, and we're already watching some of them sort of like grow on their career trajectory, will end up being arena and stadium artists. And, and if you follow like the Zach Bryan trajectory, that might be a year from now, and then I hope they'll pay it forward and help support some of the other emerging artists through CMA. And so there's models like that we're looking at to be able to help make sure that we can provide care also for teams that are operating at much more entry level in the industry early on in their career.
Yeah. I love that idea, and I love that CMA is offering grants. It would be great for I would, what I would love to see is that just grants being offered to every emerging artist in every genre, that they can tap into somewhere. And I'm curious if you have any ideas of like what that somewhere is. Is it like a Live Nation program because they control so many venues and tours? Is it, like what is the infrastructure? Unfortunately, in the US, we don't really have much of a grant infrastructure here like you do in Canada for artists and stuff like that. So like, how can artists tap into something like this right now? Or maybe what are you working on if there
Yeah,
is nothing
we're
right
talking
now?
to all the potential entities that could be that place.
Okay.
Well, it just
Okay.
just to step back for a second, I think to
Sure.
Chaim's point earlier, this is something that we think a lot about. And we have been immensely humbled and are immensely grateful that we have been out with some of the world's biggest artists to almost like proof of concept this and see how it can work at the highest level. And yes, there are huge gaps in services that we provide and services that every other organization can provide. We spend a lot of time thinking about how to fix this, right? How do we solve this puzzle in a sense? And I think, Ari, everything that you were talking about is A, on the table, B, been thought about, and C, being having active conversations with, right?
Okay. Sure.
There is immense interest at the label level to figure out how to do something. Right. I can tell you firsthand, I'm not going to disclose who the labels are, but massive, big labels for emerging artists, at least on their roster. Right. We still can't, people who are maybe unsigned is a whole different thing. But there's interest at the label level. There's interest at the promoter level. There's interest at the nonprofit level with our amazing partners at the Music Health Alliance and at Music Cares, who we have strong, robust relationships with, who we've worked with and they've seen sort of the quality and caliber of our work and are, figuring out new programs to roll out in the Country Music Association. And then there's lots of other sources of financing, if you will, that maybe are a bit more untraditional, that we are working on. And I think not only that is, we are working on more robust clinical programs to be rolled out in the next 6 months. Like one of the cool things is that as the years have gone on, more and more interest has happened. We were doing more and more work, and that says to us, the feedback is keep going, keep going, keep going. And so what we're doing right now in the clinical model and the delivery, what it is right now is not what it's going to look like in a year. And I'm hopeful, excited about being able to support a hell of a lot more people in a lot more meaningful ways, in ways that can meet you where you're at, whether you have health insurance or not, or you want to tap into a grant or whatever it might be. Like we are working on this actively. And it's sometimes a slow burn, right? Because this is an industry that is slow to adapt. It is slow to change. But we're finding the heart-centered leaders in some of these organizations who want to prioritize this, believe in it, and want to make something happen. So, I think a lot of times, like, the public can feel like nothing's happening, but I can tell you that from behind the scenes, at least the conversations we have, it might take a little while, but they're happening.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear, and I look forward to see what's coming from that. It's been reported, and you listed on your website that you've worked with Beyonce and Ed Sheeran and Olivia Rodrigo, Billie Eilish, Green Day. Tell me some of those stories. How did that come to be? Talk to me about just what that means when an artist at that caliber and how you work with them.
Well, it's interesting. I will say this, which is, in every industry, and certainly most in ours, perhaps above all, where oftentimes things happen without even contracts, and everyone's like, things that are very significant, financial numbers happen without contracts. Like, all industries, it's built on relationships. And I think, for us, so much of this has been fostering those relationships with, like Zach said, the champions and the advocates and the people, Marty Hom on Olivia Rodrigo and Beyonce, and Michelle Cope, the business manager, and Nicole Massey, the production manager on Billie Eilish, and Zito, the production manager on Green Day, and I think of Helen Himmons and Chris Marsh on Ed Sheeran, right? And like, these are people who did not have to do this. They could have gone and ran their tours the same way those tours had run for the last decade, which was without support for their people. But every one of them gets it. And they understood, and they acknowledge the value of this. And as we've had a chance to be able to show them, the impact of what these kind of services look like, every one of those people were people how, in the origin of sort of like, was it someone that we met and we were like, we should do this? Or was it someone that heard us speak at the conference at Lidditz and they came to us and we're like, we should do this on our tour? Every tour looks a little different.
Sure.
And kind of Zack hinted to it earlier, which is like, this is born out of people's experience. The reason they care for their people is because they've seen it, right? And these are tour managers, tour directors, production managers, sometimes management who have experienced the cost of not having mental health support. They've lost people around them. They've lost friends. They've watched people get critically injured. They've watched tours get canceled. They've maybe had people who have attempted suicide on tour, people that were close to them or people on tours that they were overseeing. And these things happen all across the industry all the time. And we don't hear about it. If it's an A-list artist where something happens, you'll hear about it, if it's the artist who's in peril, right? But if it's a rigger or, the playback tech, that never gets made public. And, but all those things happen. And these sorts of dynamic leaders have experienced these things firsthand. And I think these are the people who are helping us to change this industry, because every one of them, when we sat down in the conversation, either them or whoever started the conversation, our side or their side, we're like, we want to do this for our people. We're going to take this to the artist. We're going to take this to management. We're going to advocate for this.
Great. Tell me the Beyonce story.
All right. So the Beyonce story, should I tell the full Beyonce story? The Beyonce story is we met Marty Hom, the legend who, has been one of the great tour directors in this industry for probably, 20 plus years. He sort of ran Fleetwood Mac's tours and Stevie Nicks for, forever. And
Barbra Streisand.
Whoever at the Stones. We met, we were introduced to Marty when he was the tour director for a big pop tour. And we were introduced by the people at Rock Lidditz, which is an amazing, for those who don't know, right, an amazing rehearsal facility out in Amish country in Pennsylvania, really, founded by the Clare family and Troy and Sean Clare and the rest of the wonderful people who run Clare Global and all the, sort of audio powerhouses, and put this campus together where a lot of the larger tours rehearse. In 2021, we went and did a 2-week mental health week there to help train everybody in all the companies that are housed on campus and offer a bunch of support services and workshops. And it really helped change the culture and open the entire culture in that Rock Lidditz community towards, sort of normalizing mental health. And they now have a full-time therapist on staff there. And it's great and wonderful, and they do amazing things. And through them, we were introduced to Marty as they were prepping for a really big pop tour that was going out. And we sat in a Zoom call with him and the production manager, Jason Danter, and a bunch of other people from the artist team. And they were like, all right, well, tell us what it's like to, mental health support on a tour, and who's going to use it and what's it going to cost and why should we do this? And, and it was like, and to be honest, it was a great conversation because it was one of the first conversations that really forced us to think critically about like, how are you going to answer those questions? Tours are going to ask, why should we do this? Is it worth the money? Is anybody really even going to use this? How do you get an uptick in usage on a tour? Who has time on a show day? And it forced us to help really refine the model so that we could address every one of those things, which since then, I think we've done gotta say, Zach, we've done a pretty good job of being able to make it really work for the tours.
Sure.
But back then, so Marty Hom was on this call and he was like, all right, when we want this, and we also like nutritional support and an exercise physiologist, and they have this whole list, and we're like, great, no problem. We send them this whole proposal, and they're like, basically some version of like, fuck right off, because the number for all that was like a hefty, and it was a large tour, right? And it was supporting a lot of people with a lot of services. They were just like,
the truth, Ari, he told us to fuck off, basically, right? We sent him a big budget, and we said, this is what we're going to do. And he sort of, I mean, I say this but he sort of laughed us out of the room and said, no one's ever going to do this. And,
Yeah. And then we saw him again at Rock Lidditz, like 6 months later or a year later. And we were like, Marty, can we have 5 minutes? Can we sit down with you again? And he was like, I remember which I was like, hey, whatever it's called, Studio 52 or something, this like open space there in Pod 2. And he was like, all right, I'll give you 5 minutes. So the two of us sat down with him, and then we ended up sitting there for like half hour. And we had by then refined the model already. So we understood like how to make it work and how to answer all those questions that he had and how to make it, sort of cost effective. And he was like, all right, like, yeah, you guys are onto something. And so that was that. This is before, Renaissance, whatever it is. 6 months later, Renaissance gets announced. Marty Hum calls us and says, all right, guys, I'm doing Renaissance. Like, pitch me, So great. We send him the proposal for Renaissance. That tour launched in April in Paris. This is in January. And in January, we provide a proposal for the tour to be able to support about 500 crew on that tour. Between, A party, B party, band, dancers, and then C party, all of the crew level. So about 500 individuals. So we sent over a really nice proposal, and he was like, great, this looks good. And we took it to the tour. He took it to the tour, and in the end, the tour decided not to do it. And they were like, whatever it wasn't back then already, right? Two years ago, it was harder for us to, I think, still convince tours to bake this into the budget, to have a line item for this. And the tour decided, for whatever reasons, and they're certainly entitled to spend their money how they choose. They decided not to do it. And that was that. And the tour launched in April, and in July it came through Toronto. I happened to be in Toronto. Marty and I got together, had lunch, talked about how the tour was going. There were some challenges, some things that already been, big tour, a tour of that size, like inevitably with that many moving parts, things are going to be difficult, and it's going to be,
of course,
stressful on crew, leadership, band, dancers at every level. And we talked about it really candidly, and it was like, great, good to see you. That was that. A week later, we got a phone call, and it was like something had happened on the tour. There was an incident. And they basically called us and said, it was a Friday afternoon. They said, great, can you have a team in Chicago in 4 hours? And we had a team in Chicago 4 hours later, and we started that tour and ran 4 months with them, where we did, hundreds of sessions in person and virtually, got to know every layer of that tour, from the band, the dancers, the leadership, the crew, and really helped kind of keep that tour going strong till it's finished. Changed really the culture and the morale on the tour, and then sat at Rock Lidditz at the conference the year later, and on stage with Marty and Espy, who was one of the road managers on that tour, to present, like, here was the impact that we were able to make on this tour. And it was it was one of those experiences where it didn't happen in the beginning, but we're grateful that people like Marty and Espy and all those, they really got it, and they were able to advocate for it in the right time.
And have they continued for the Cowboy Carter tour? I mean, is this now something that is just part of the operation? That's a no. Okay. So why? Let me follow that up with why, if it was so successful and it went so well and it was so needed and important, and you came in a triage moment, when they realized, man, we should have prioritized this from the get-go and we didn't, and now we need to, we had an incident and come up. Why would it not be a part of every tour following that moment if it was so successful?
It's a great question.
We're wondering the same thing.
I think often what happens on tours too is personnel changes, leadership changes, people who bring you into situations change, and
Sure.
they decide to do different things. I will say this though, outside of the Beyonce tour,
Yeah.
Marty brings us out all the time, right? So Marty was the one who brought us onto Olivia's tour and subsequently many other tours.
Before it started?
Yes.
That was the ideal model. We supported them beginning in rehearsals.
So tell me about that. Talk to me about the Olivia tour. How did that go?
Great. I mean, I was the lead clinician on it. We did more sessions on that tour than we've done in any other tour. We supported them for about the 8 months of that run, from February through, October, whatever it was. We were with them in the US, in Europe, a bunch of dates. The virtual sessions were well used. We supported people at every level of that tour leadership.
But it was from the get-go. It was like you sent the proposal, and it was like, okay, he didn't tell you to fuck off this time, I guess.
No, I think
I'm getting that.
Here's where rehearsals are. Get the team to production rehearsals so that you can get to know our people and they can get to know you in advance before it starts.
And I think for people who have been in this industry a long time, they know who the artists are who are going to buy into something like this, and who the artists are that aren't going to buy into something like this. And so for Olivia, the whole thing was planned. Chayim, I remember you went to Palm Springs for rehearsals. Like, we were there during pre-production and all the way through. Europe, like all over the world with that tour, and did hundreds and hundreds of clinical hours with that tour. And, I think a lot of even just us sitting here came about because someone on that tour decided to speak publicly about what we had done. We had never spoken publicly about that because we don't speak publicly about that. And what happened was,
right,
she started talking about it, and then the press started picking up on it. And so we've been, even in the last 3 weeks, more and more people, we had more eyes on what we're doing because more of our artists are coming out and saying, we're doing this. And I think, that's the best feedback that we could ever get, is sort of unsolicited people from the tour who say, this is the greatest thing I've ever had on a tour. I commend Olivia and tour leadership for being able to do this.
That's great. So I appreciate that this exists now, and that, what you guys are doing, and it's so important for the industry. And this is, I look forward to seeing where this goes, and how you will come up with ways to support the more emerging artists, which are struggling equally, if not more, to be honest, because they're also dealing with financial burdens that those at the bigger levels don't actually have to deal with, which is, as I don't need to tell you, is a whole other stressor that weighs on everyone in these operations. So I look forward to all of that to come. I have one final question that I ask everyone that comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Thank you for asking that question, Ari. I've been staring at the poster that you have behind you for the last little while, and I've actually been thinking about not necessarily that question, but what is the new music business? And I think that I think we're entering a new music industry for a lot of reasons, but I think the recognition of the suffering of the people who make it happen is way more at the forefront. And I think what is happening on the touring level, the corporate level, the indie record label level, at every single part of this industry where we work, new leaders are coming into place, or older leaders are understanding the need to do this. And it doesn't matter what business you study. It is a good economic argument. It is good for the bottom line to take care of your people. We can make the human argument all day. We're clinicians. We understand the human impact of it. But I think from the business, invest in your people. Invest in the people who are making it happen. Provide these services. Even if you are providing great corporate benefits at a label or something like that, providing specialized ancillary services is effective. It makes people feel seen, heard. And you know better than anybody, Ari, the people in this industry will work their ass off. They work their ass off at every level. When they feel supported, they feel like they are worth it, and the people give a shit about them, they will work even harder. And they will do it happily. And so I think the new music business, the way I see it, is being able to do the amazing things that we do, being able to run these tours and routings that are insane and high stress levels and deadlines and putting out records and doing these amazing things, but doing it in a way where the people are more supportive. And the trope is just not the show must go on, but is the show must go on and we can help people.
A true Amber Health-esque answer. And just to add to that, I think, the other, and it's completely sort of consistent with that, is I think in the new music business, careers have to be sustainable, which is we don't mortgage the long term for the sake of the short term. And it's not worth, burning out, on a tour to then not be able to tour, again for 3 years because someone's in a rehab center, and it's not worth sacrificing potentially 30 years of a great career, whether that's as an artist or a crew member or someone who works in a record label or in an office or a management company, or it's not worth sacrificing a 30-year career by staying up all night every night and burning yourself out, and stress levels and suicide risk and depression and anxiety untreated, and the substances to fuel that. The new music business is not only, like Zach said, I think it's human-centered, and it has the value of sustainable careers. And we pace ourselves and we invest in ourselves in the short term so that we can have a long term.
Well said. Chayim, Zack, thank you guys so much. It's great.
All right. Thank you.
This episode was edited by Peter Schrupp with music by Brassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.